myself more of an artist, more of a creative person. So I'll talk a little bit about that in case you guys are interested. So for starters, oh, one second, let me just move my slides. So who am I? So first of all, as Eric said, I'm a software engineer at Instagram, and I'm an iOS engineer working on Instagram messaging. So basically I work on the app that's on people's iPhones, which is honestly super exciting because I can tell pretty much most people what I do for work, and they'll have some kind of knowledge of what I'm talking about, which is really fun. Since I know it's impacting a lot of people, and that's something I really wanted for my job. And that's to say that any of you could probably work at a company just like that, where you're able to touch the lives of so many people with the changes you make. And I work on messaging, like I said, which is really fun. And I enjoy working on what's basically called a product team, because it's a product that people use like every day, and it's very user facing, versus just some systems like that people never touch if they're like users of the app, which is again also cool stuff, but that's just not what I wanted to do. So how did I really get here? So I'll talk a little bit about my experience in college and some of my interests. So some of the things I was involved in when I was in college, I just graduated this past year and moved to New York City in September. I was part of an org called Women in Computing, which I'll talk about more later. And that basically allowed me to help other women in the CS department gain more interest regarding computer science and help them and mentor them. I was part of a fashion magazine in college, had nothing to do with computer science. But like I said, I love being creative, and I love being able to use that side of my brain a lot. And just because I'm interested in computer science, or just because you're interested in computer science, doesn't mean you shouldn't tap into the other things you're also interested in, because it can really help you in your tech journey. So I did a lot of photography for this. And I also like to run. I was just telling Eric, I came back from a run, like not even like 15 minutes ago. So there's that. And while I was in college, I went to UC San Diego and I majored in computer science, but I also did a minor. And obviously college is a bit a ways away, but it's something to think about, because looking back, I can't believe I had to decide what I wanted to do for the rest of my life at like 17. Like that's kind of insane. So it's something to think about, that when you're in college, or even when you're near the point where you're trying to decide what you want to do, there are options to do this and this, or this with a little bit of this, and you don't have to like stick to just one specific thing. So once I realized that, breaking into tech seemed a lot less scary for me, because you could take little bits of other things you're interested in your life and bring them into technology. So for example, like I said, computer science, but I minored in what's called design at UCSD, but that's like a very broad term. What it basically entails is you do a lot of research, like UX research, which is basically interviewing people about their experience using different apps and products, and trying to figure out a better way to fix those apps and solve their issues. And you also get to design what the app looks like, which is so much fun, because you just get to kind of build an app without actually coding it sometimes. And then you can work with other engineers or even yourself, and then build the app completely from scratch. So seeing that entire process, from the idea to seeing how it helps your users, to designing it all the way to building it, was something that I found really satisfying. So college gives you the opportunities to explore all of these different things, and not just the coding portion, which I found super fun. So, and then as for my experience working in tech, this is something that I really want to stress about, that coming into college, like I didn't have internships or anything. Obviously, again, this is like a really early thing to think about, but I'm sure all of you've heard about like, oh, this person's working in this huge company, they're doing all these crazy things, and they've probably just been like really good at this like their entire life. Like that is so not true. And I'll continue to stress on that during this presentation. Everything you're seeing on this screen happened during college. Like I barely knew really how to write code before coming in. I had taken a CS class, and I thought I wanted to major in computer science because I really sucked at physics. So I was like, well, computer science doesn't involve physics, so I might as well. And I loved fact that I could be kind of creative with it, and I wanted to see where it went. And coming into college, there was a lot of people who had so much experience in high school. They had done several internships, they had connections, their parents knew other people who could get them internships. And even though my mom worked in tech, like I didn't have those kinds of connections and I didn't have all those skills. So I want to stress that everything I'm about to say is something that is achievable, even if you don't start at like the age of 5. So going off of that, so I worked at a company called Viasat, and they basically do satellites and internet stuff. And I found that super fun because I had never really worked on something that was not just an app that I had designed on my own. It was working on a little bit of a bigger product, a larger team with more people. And I got to basically design one of their web pages for them that was this visualization tool for how satellites move around the globe. Not super relevant to you guys, but it's just to say that that's one thing that I worked on. Versus when I was working at Instagram, I actually worked on Instagram stories, which is like completely the opposite of trying to do data visualization for satellites. So it was a lot of front end and design, and I got to collaborate and talk to lots and lots of people. That's another thing I want to stress on. Working in tech doesn't mean you're just going to be sitting at your laptop like all day doing absolutely nothing, all by yourself. I know Eric, for example, he's not working in a corporate job right now, but even doing research, you're talking to lots of people, you're talking to your mentors, other people to get help from. And so if you're someone who's really good at communicating and can get people to align on a solution, like tech is still a really, really good place for you, because if you can't do that, like if you're a really great coder, you're not going to succeed. So working at Instagram, which is this huge company, I found how important it was to be able to communicate and convince people of your ideas and all of that. And then the last company that I have on here is Tableau/Salesforce. I was another person doing front end, and that's basically designing what the website looked like and creating it. And it was more data visualization. Something to say for the fact that I worked at multiple different companies, I was able to see what I wanted and what I didn't want. And that didn't necessarily happen to correlate with how well known the company was, or like if someone was going to think it was a really good company. Like I wanted to see what fit me the best. And that's something I also want to make sure you do when you're trying to go into tech, even if it's not working for a company. I'm going to talk about this in a second, but there's so many different things you can do with a computer science degree. And I really want you to know that you don't have to go into like a certain field of it just because other people think it's like super good. Like if you don't like it, that's not going to be the best fit for you. So like, for example, out of these, I ended up choosing Instagram, not necessarily because I thought other people were going to think I was cool because I chose Instagram, but I really loved the manager that I had when I was an intern. He made me realize that I wasn't just an engineer, and I could bring other aspects of my life, like being creative, into my job. And he was super nice and super fun to work with. And I was like, if other people like him work at this company, I'll be happy here. And I didn't necessarily feel like that at the other companies, even though they're also really good places. So just wanted to stress on that. And then what exactly is computer science? I've been like talking about it this whole time, and I didn't really reiterate what exactly it is. So the definition that you're going to see when you like look it up is this one. Computer science is a study of algorithmic processes, computational machines, and computation itself, which is a fancy way of saying that there's a lot of math and logic involved, and you basically are using math and logic to come to a solution, whether that is a research problem, a math problem, or trying to build a website. A lot of it is problem solving, and that's really the core aspect of it. So what I have been talking about this whole time is basically what you would consider software engineering, and you're basically engineering products. So that involves what's called backend versus what's called front end in like very layman's terms. So backend is basically all the code that you don't really see that's making things run. So like, for example, if you're typing into like Google and you're searching for something, that will go somewhere, a bunch of stuff will happen, and it'll come back to you and be like, here's all this information. So where all of that logic that's figuring out what information to send back to you, you don't see that at all. That's all like the back end stuff. What you would call front end is how you're displaying all the information you got back. So once you get back this information, Google's going to be like, okay, so here's recipe number 1 for like pumpkin pie. Here's recipe number 2 for pumpkin pie, blah, blah, blah. So that's what I would call front end. And all the internships I've been talking about that I've done so far, I've primarily done front end because I just really enjoy the visual aspect and the creative aspect of it. And I'm just like a very visual person. If you're not, totally cool. Backend's also super great. Eric himself is like a big ML person over here. And I don't know if he's talked to you guys about it, but that's definitely more on that side. So let's see. Another thing to talk about when you're thinking about computer science and software engineering is working at a startup versus like a really big company. I already kind of reiterated on this, but Instagram is like a huge company, like massive. And so are places like Amazon, Microsoft, Google. And growing up, even when I didn't think I was going to go into tech, like I was around 12, 13, I barely even knew what I wanted for lunch the next day, like forget my career. I knew all these names. Like I had equated success with working at a company like Facebook or working at a company like Google, like whatever. But it's really important to consider what it's like working at a startup versus a big company. And you'll have so much time to think about this, but I just want to plant this seed early because I wish someone told me about this when I was younger. And I didn't really know that this was much of an option until I was like a junior in college. And I was like, oh, okay. So working in big tech usually offers higher compensation, more money, and a lower risk just because so many people are working on this huge thing. Chances of you breaking something and is like very low, or chances of you making a huge difference is also very low in the same way, just because there's so many people trying to do stuff. Versus working at a startup, you have a lot larger stake. If it's anywhere between like 20 to 100 people, like what you're doing matters. At the same time though, if you mess up, that's bad. But if you do something great, it's also really awesome. And I think you can learn a lot working at that kind of pace. So when it comes down to it, eventually if you end up wanting to go into software engineering, it's important to think about what do you really want out of that experience and not just being like, okay, I want to work for Microsoft because they're good and people told me that that's a good place to work. Like, I wish someone told me that when I was younger, and this is something important to think about. So the name doesn't really matter as much as how much you learn getting out of it. Like, for example, if I leave Instagram, like let's say in the next year, and someone else I know leaves a startup in the next year, and let's say they have more experience than me from their year in the startup than I did in my year at Instagram, just because I worked at Instagram means literally nothing if they like learned a lot. So it's important to really consider how much you take advantage of the opportunities you have when you're at the company, and how much you're willing to learn in that period of time. So I just wanted to put that out there. Another aspect of computer science is you're able to do research, which I talked a little bit about. This is another thing that I wish someone told me about when I was starting college. I only thought that with a computer science degree, you could go into working at a big tech company. Are you seeing a trend? I only thought you'd go into working at a big tech company and like nothing else, but you can do research. Some of my friends do research for ethical AI, trying to make sure that, like, for example, search engines aren't biased and helping people out. Eric's doing a lot of research himself in the AI and ML sphere. And it's really a great opportunity to be really innovative and try new things and just like dive deeper into something. And this is something I wish I knew about. I don't do research anymore, so I can't touch on it like too much, but it's a really, really awesome thing that I wish more people talked about when talking about what you can do with a career out of computer science. So you can go into academia like this, and once you do research, a lot of people end up teaching or becoming professors, or sometimes becoming like research scientists. And yeah, so this is something I touched on again already. The main key core component of all of these things is a lot of collaboration. if you are not able to collaborate with people, then you're probably not going to do super well at this job. And so I really encourage you to know that that is a really like core part of it, and just that being able to collaborate will really help you succeed in this career. Okay, so I said this already, and then this is something that I have been thinking a lot about, or I've thought a lot about. Is this really for me? Like, after all of the slides I've just given you, that's possibly a question that's like running through your brain. So I'm going to give you my, sorry, my trajectory of how I got to the conclusion, like, is software engineering really for me? From like the starting point of when I first like thought about it. So for the longest time, I thought I was going to go into photography or journalism or writing. So I was in high school, and I was like a sophomore or junior, and I was like, okay, this is the trajectory that we're going down. And like I mentioned earlier, I gave a CS class a shot. I gave it a shot. And this is something that you'll hear a lot of people say. It's either they've been doing CS since they were really young, or they were just like, you know what, I'm just going to try. And so that was me. And I thought I would, like I said, I thought I would end up in a creative field and that I didn't have a place in tech. But after taking that class, I was like, okay, I can be creative with this, and I don't really know where it's going to go, but this could be a really fun opportunity for me. And the only reason I was really nervous is that I didn't really know that many people in tech who had the same interests as me. And so I didn't know if there was like a place for me in terms of someone who liked photography and journalism and writing. Popular media doesn't really like advertise that as much. But after being in tech for a while now, I can encourage you, there are people who have many varied interests. It's like not only these, but I know lots of people who are also interested in fashion, and lots of people, they don't work on video game design, but they love playing video games. And they just, so many people do so many things. And just being an engineer, they become a better one by combining all of those different interests. So besides all of the things that I had talked about in the very beginning, I also want to encourage you to think about that all of those accolades that I have or that other people have don't really matter as much as who are you to your core, and how can you bring those unique values of yourself into your job. So for me, I'm an artist, I'm very detail oriented, and I'm good at communication. And those are three things I try to bring into work every single day and try to remind myself that I'm good at whenever I feel like down about my work or my job. And I encourage you, if you go into tech, to think about, what are three things that I bring to the table? Sorry, someone's like buzzing my door. What are three things that you can bring to the table that, not just because other people can't, but that'll help you stand out and make you better at your job? So those are mine. And with all of that, after I got to college, so I started taking CS classes. I worked on a lot of different websites that I just created. And I just want to note that all of these three things weren't like for school. I did these because I was just interested in them. I thought it was fun, and I wanted to like learn something new. And I feel like when you're in tech and you finally find something that like kind of piques your interest, you'll find yourself just randomly spending time on it out of class. And for me, it was just like designing random websites like this and building them. So like I said, photography and being an artist has really correlated with wanting to do these things. So if you're someone like that, I'd love to talk about it. I'll have my email at the end, so you can email me if you have any questions about that. And I also was able to create all of those websites and lay all of them out on this like app called Figma. And you're basically able to like design the flow of apps and stuff, which I loved being able to do that. And it was something that I was just really good at because of the experience I brought in as like an artist and being detail oriented again. Another thing in tech that I want to say is that there's a really strong sense of community. And I encourage you to try to find that regardless of what you're really interested in. And I don't want you to think about it as, okay, I want to find community because they can get me better opportunities. It's important to think of it as, I want to find community because these are people who will be there for me when times get tough. These are people that I can help out in the future. It's people who can be my friends. And I was able to do that during college. And there's things in high school that you can also do, and like late middle school, which I'll link at the end of this deck. But for me, for example, I joined Women in Computing, like I mentioned, and my pitch to them for why they should take me was, your Instagram account really sucks and I'm going to make it look a lot better. And once I did that, I also started to work on outreach for them, creating projects, teaching high school kids about computer science. And again, taking my own spin on what I was good at and bringing value to the community. So that's like a trend I've continuously talked about. So I encourage you to try to find community, not just for like an application or a resume, but something that really resonates with you. So there's that. And in the grand scheme of things, again, that led me to where I am now, working on iOS, collaborating with lots of people, bringing in all of those different interests together. And here are some classes that I took in college. If I'll have this slide deck somewhere in case you guys want to look at this again, but I took a variety of classes. Some of them were like very closely tied to what I was really interested in, like the design class in the middle, versus theory classes, which teach you a lot about math, versus this class called operating systems, which is super back end. So even if you don't know exactly what sphere of tech you want to go into, after all of those like 15 things I listed, college gives you the opportunity to try different things so you can figure out which of those might fit. I know lots of people like me who came into college and they're like, I think CS could be cool, but I don't know what part of it is going to fit me the best. And you can take many different classes to see what that would be. And I'm going to end this with a couple of things I wish I knew coming into computer science or like software engineering that I wish someone told me when I was like in high school or early in college. So failure is inevitable. I'm going to just start with that because I think it's really easy to say like, it's going to be like super easy breezy and just like totally fine. But there were times that I like didn't do good. I failed math in 6th grade. I got a F and I was like, you know what? I am never, ever, ever going to go into a STEM career. It's just not happening. It was not meant for me. And that's funny to think about now, literally looking at me giving you this presentation. And it's just to say that even if something goes wrong once, doesn't mean that it's like literally the end of the world. I had to try really, really hard to be good at math. Math is still something that's not super, super easy for me. But I think once I got to a point where I was able to get better at it and not just like fail, then I started enjoying it a lot more. So that's something to think about in certain areas of tech as well. Some things might not come naturally, but you might think they're cool. And I encourage you to dive a little deeper and see if you can get better at it and conquer your fear of whatever that is. So for me, that was math and some other classes that I took in college. And even though I'm not really in those areas right now working in them, I'm really glad that I got to like really get a lot better and do a lot better at those things because it opened new doors and new things I could have possibly wanted to go into. And this is something I've been talking about. There's lots of interests for everyone. You could do backend, AI, you could do design, front end, startups, big tech. You could work for local businesses and create their websites. You could create an app for people who run or work out and have them find each other and work out together, like whatever. Find your own interest and see how you can spin that into something that is tech related rather than just trying to do some cookie cutter path. Again, success looks different on everyone. Like I said, timelines are very different. I have an article I've written about this as well, and I linked it at the end of this presentation. People have done big tech internships their freshman year of college. Mine was junior year. A lot of my coworkers, I tell them sometimes like, I don't know if I'm doing anything right, like ever. And they were like, Sravya, we're 30. We started working here when we were like 27. You're literally 22 and you're already working at the same company we are. Like, it's all in perspective how much you're achieving. Like sometimes it's hard to believe that you're doing anything right, but you have to look back and see how much you've grown. And that sounds super cheesy, but I have to like remind myself of that every day. And again, this is something I also think about. You'll still wonder if you made it after all of those years. Like after all these years working in tech, I'm like, am I doing it? Like, and this quote really stuck with me that someone gave during a different presentation that I was attending. And it was like talking about how the probability of everything going right for you every single time you do anything is like really, really slim, you know? And so chances are you probably put a lot of work into it, because the chance that it's just going to work out every time and you just ended up where you are all on its own is super unlikely. And when someone put it for me in that like mathematical formula that probably just doesn't end up on yes every single time, I was like, okay, so I did something right to get here. And I think that's something important to think about as well, going forward. And I already talked about this. Coding is something that's creative. I think people always talk about like right brain is like very like mathematical or something, and like left brain is like super creative. I think to be a good coder, you have to be both. It doesn't really matter if you're doing like visual stuff. If you're problem solving, you're coming up with solution, it involves being creative to step outside of the box. So I encourage you to lean into that if you're someone who likes to be creative. And lastly, lean into your uniqueness. I, again, have been talking about this, but that's what's going to set you apart in this industry. And that's what's going to allow you to succeed. So with that, here's a bunch of resources that your teacher can probably share with you from this presentation. I'll have Eric send it over and you can look at them, click on them, whatever. But it's some guides on programs, different summer programs, tips on internships. You can save these for future later date. And I have my email here if you ever want to ask me anything. And yeah, if you have any questions, I don't know if you have time, but you can ask me now or you can email them to me later. So yeah, thank you so much for having me.
All right, thank you. I'll have a question, and then if somebody has a question, you can either just come up to me and tell me, or you can just write it down and give it to me, or you can ask it from where you are. They can't see you on the video. I mean, they can hear you, can't see you. Then so I'll just repeat it. So just you don't worry about like getting so self-conscious about like, oh, you know. Well, anyway, since you work at Instagram, and I'm sure when you introduce yourself to somebody or you come across new people, what are the questions that you get when they find out that you work at Instagram? Like, what are the crazy questions? Because I know sometimes when you say somebody says they work at a certain company, they think you do everything, and in reality,
Right.
you're just like, I can't control that. So what are the kind of questions that you get?
Yeah, so the very first question, I'm gonna stop sharing this real quick, but the very first question I usually get is like, what do you work on? And then I explain, I'm like, I work on iOS, I work on Instagram messaging, and usually people like know what I'm talking about and they're like, oh, cool. And then the second question is, can you get them to change this or something? And I'm like, guys, I don't work on that. Like, I literally can't. But it's funny because like in some part of my brain, like I've probably heard about this thing that they want being changed. I've probably seen them post about it like internally, I think it's fun when people ask me questions about the app and I'm like, I can't tell you, but I know what's going on because I read everything inside. So it's super fun to know what's going on internally at a company like Instagram and know about the launches before they happen, and then seeing everyone like talk about it after. I'm like, I knew about this 2 months ago, guys. So that's like one of the main questions I get. Everyone's like, can you tell me what's launching next? And I'm like, no, I'm sorry, I can't, but
Yeah, people don't understand that when you work at a company, you're kind of like bound by like, okay, you're gonna work on this, but we can't tell anybody before this time, and we're gonna be the ones to do it, not the developers. And they don't understand that if you tell somebody, even if it's a family member or somebody that you're confident in, that could cost you your job, right?
Yeah. There's like an entire team. They basically are called product marketing managers. And their whole job is making sure that everything that we launch as a company has the correct external view from like other news outlets and stuff. They communicate with them to be like, okay, this is what we're launching. This is what you need to say about it, like whatever. And they have all these large Google Docs basically talking about it. And as developers, our main job is to write it and make sure no one else knows what we're writing. So yeah, that's very true. You can't talk about it.
also, when you're working on something that they want to launch that they think is going to make a big impact, like a big change, like if it's stories or whatever, are you confined to, do they say like, okay, this is a really big deal to us, and so you can only work here. You can't take any of this home. You can only work in this space, like for
Um,
privacy purposes?
I think like not really. We have just like a bunch of security stuff on our laptops, and they just are
Mm.
basically like don't code in public places. I think that's like
Uh,
the main thing, especially because like for me, I'll have my phone out when I'm like testing things.
right.
So like if someone looks over and they're like, "What is that?" You know. Um, so basically, it's like don't work at a coffee shop. But other than that, it's fine.
In the last, maybe in the last year or 6 months, is there something that you've worked on that has made like an impact on Instagram that you're like, oh, I'm really, really proud of this one thing, or that's something that I want to be to this point remembered for, that you usually mention to other people, like, hey, by the way, this little feature that you like or that you use a lot of, that's kind of like part of that's me.
Yeah, some interesting things that I have worked on that got launched. So when I was an intern, I added this feature where when you're like going through people's stories, you can like mute and unfollow them while you're viewing it. And basically before you had to like go all the way to their profile and like do it, and it was like really irritating. And so that was like the very first thing I worked on. It wasn't huge, but it was a good, useful feature that people ended up using. Like I still use it. And it's nice to know like when I click the button, I'm like, I know exactly all the code that's like there. I know the whole behind the scenes, and that's like really funny to think about because now I use the app and all I see is the file names. Like I can't unsee how the app is like built in the background, which is really funny. Um, and then Instagram, I think like 2 years ago, they launched this link sticker on your Instagram stories. And so I wasn't on the team. I like had just left the team when they were working on that because I was interning, but I got to be a part of all the conversations and I helped write a bunch of docs like leading up to it. So when it finally got launched, I was like, oh my God, like I really got to see the evolution of this product. And that was really fun as well.
Yeah, well, I don't know about most of you, but I really like that mute feature.
No, that's a good one. Yeah. I love that
It
feature.
is cumbersome because you do have to go to when you did have to go to the profile, I'm like, oh my God. But now I'm like, if I see my annoying family, I was like, oh, I can just mute you right now because I'm sick of seeing the same type of thing that you're doing, and it's freed up what it does. But well, the purpose and what it does is it just frees up a lot of space on your timeline. When you see all the people and their icons come across, it frees up a lot of space, because if you've muted 15 people that take up a lot of your space, it's just like you save, it's a time saver.
No, it really is.
And
That was like the main reason. It was basically like we know this isn't going to move like top line metrics for the company and like gain money, but it's going to make people have a better experience on the app. And I think it's always important to think about those things, like not just in terms of revenue, but making sure that people don't hate this app. I think some of those things like can't be measured sometimes, and I think that's one of those things.
yeah, when you're in your meetings, how when do you because I know everybody has feedback on Instagram, like we need this, we don't need that, we need this. Well, so how do you decide what you're actually going to pay more attention to? Is it just basically the pure volume of the same comment, or is it something else that you look at before you decide on where to move on a feature?
I think there's like a lot of things that like play into it. It's not only like how is it like being received externally? Like, is it doing well like revenue wise? Does the company currently think it's a priority? And it's like a mixture of like all of those different things combined, and it just matter. Like all companies also go through like reorgs and priority shifts like all the time, and it's like a mesh of which of those things actually matter like right now and what are we focusing on. So I think it's all of those, but it just depends what product and what you're looking at.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, I took up all the questions here. Not all the questions, but anybody have questions regarding what she does, or specifics as to like how she got into what she's doing, or just anything?
How many projects have she worked on during the time she did that job?
So more or less, if you could give me a ballpark estimate, how many projects have you worked on while you've been at Instagram?
I'd say like a total of like 2 to 3 right now. And I think, can you hear me? Sorry.
Sorry.
Okay, yeah. I'd say a total of 2 to 3.
Hold on a second. Let me let me reconnect my smartboard because I guess it lost. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I'd say it's somewhere between 2 to 3.
Okay.
And I also work on a lot of other initiatives, which are just like making sure that we can refactor the code so it's working better and increasing speeds and stuff like that. So that's a lot of what people focus on at a lot of jobs other than just like actual projects. So that's like what I'm working on right now.
Okay. Any other questions? What's that?
How many things that they try to do, but they decided not to?
Oh, okay. So if you can give me an example of the number of things, that projects that you work on that in theory seem like they should go well, but ultimately you couldn't bring you couldn't finish because so many things happened that was just like so in other words, what he's asking is like how many for the 2 or 3 things that you described that you were able to get done, how many failures did you have along the way of other projects that didn't go?
I think for me, I got lucky with the projects that I got that they were able to ship in the app because they weren't huge changes and they just made a lot of sense when I first started working on them. But I know people on my team who some of the projects they end up getting, then they spend months on them and then they just don't end up being able to go into the app because maybe metrics were bad or like users didn't receive it properly and like it wasn't what people are looking for. And it was like this huge thing. They were like 5 months on it and then it was just like scrap. And it's interesting because it's like you didn't technically fail in terms of like you achieved the goal, which was creating the product. Like you built the thing, but like not being able to ship it is like really hard to reckon with because it's technically not your fault. Like you got to sign this project, like the team got to sign this project. But it's demoralizing knowing that you weren't able to like actually ship it in the end. And I think that's one of the things that comes with working on a product team is that you'll build lots of things. Like for all the things everyone sees on the app, there's like at least 4 or 5 times the amount of stuff that's being built that like isn't actually like shipping, that you aren't actually seeing. So I think it depends how you want to view that. It's technically a failure, but you technically like learned a lot out of it as well. And you also did build something. So that's something just to think about as well. So yeah, hope that answered the question.
Um, how long do you usually test something before you launch it live? Does it depend on the project, or is it like a certain specific timeline that you generally that's pretty consistent?
I think it depends on the project. Every company has like data scientists, for example, that help you figure out like, okay, we need to test on this amount of the population for this long to understand if it moves this much metrics, this much impact, and to make sure it's not broken, whatever. So I think it just depends on the project.
Any other questions? Ms. Hernandez, question? Okay. Now, I saw that you had put some resources there. Like one of them was Scratch is what we work on primarily. We're in the kind of the Python module right now. So are there any maybe middle school friendly type of application? And I've talked to Eric about some as well, but sometimes it's good to get some input from other people that maybe we might not have seen that, oh yeah, maybe we should have them work on this or try this out. Is there any other program or website that you can think of that we should maybe incorporate at this age level?
There was this like Java program. I know you just said Python, but there's this Java thing I used once when I was in high school, and I think it could be translated easily to like middle school level. And basically, we were like able to create like we were able to code like a video game, and it was really fun. I'll see if I can find the name. for it. But also when I was um, in middle school, I think they gave us like a coding class once, and I was like not good at it, but we used like Terrapin Logo, and they made us do like recursion and stuff with that, and that was fun because you were basically had this little turtle, and it's like moving around the screen like drawing stuff, and so you're able to like visually see what's happening, which allows you to better understand like what you're actually coding. So
Yeah.
that's
So
something
that's
to
what
look
we're using
into.
actually. We're using Turtle, actually.
Yeah. So turtles, when we did like recursion, I don't know if you guys are doing that or no, but that's helpful if that ever happens in this class. So yeah.
Well, that's good. At least we're on the right. Go ahead, William.
Is it JavaScript?
Yeah, JavaScript. Yeah, that's what she was talking about. Yeah, okay, so I guess it looks like we're on the right track in terms of what they should
No,
be
yeah,
learning.
definitely.
Would you, now for startups, and like we have a lot of, there are some students here that have like parents that, or family members with small businesses. So do you think it'd be a good idea to kind of like, if with the experience that they have, to kind of approach them about developing maybe an app or something techie to promote their business? Like, would you think like a base, like what would be like a simple website program to use that's really for a beginner level that they could probably manage?
I think like generally I feel like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript at like its core, like just the three languages allow you to do a lot. You can do basic stuff, you can get like super complicated with it depending on what you want to do. But that is like good enough. And there's like easy ways to host a website that aren't super complicated. But when I was in college, this design class I took, that I think is one of my favorites, we basically had to go find and work with a small business, like a real small business, and redesign an app and redesign their website. We didn't actually build it for them, but we created all the designs. We'd have like bi-weekly or weekly meetings with the founder. We'd help create a color scheme, whatever, figure out what they needed, find out who their users are. And by the end, it was like a fully fleshed out like report with like a whole thing. And obviously that's like a much larger scale because we were working in a group of like 4 people and we were all college students. But even when I wish I even like thought about that when I was in like early high school. There's like lots of small businesses in my area, and I was like, oh, can I like try redoing your website? Like, even if you don't pay me, like, oh, I'll do it, for fun. And it's like fun because you have a goal to work towards, and someone might actually benefit out of the thing you're doing. So I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. Okay, good. Anybody else? Any questions before we? You have a question? We're good. I think we're good. Well, thank you for being so generous with your time and for answering all of our questions. It was very
Of course, yeah,
interesting
I'm
to
glad.
see. And anytime we can get somebody that is in the industry that is attached to a big name, not that it doesn't matter, but it tends to get a lot of attention.
No, yeah, I know. I definitely know. I think working at a company with a big name, it's like very polarizing because it's hard for me to figure out who I am outside of that, but it's also a good thing because it opens doors. So like I mentioned throughout the entire talk, there's just so many things to think about when having that kind of opportunity. So yeah.
Okay. Well, that wraps it up for me, Eric. I don't know if you want to chime in and.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just wanted to add a couple things. So one, so for you guys deciding on what projects to do. So I think Turtle is something to think about. There's also Python. Python Turtle. There's Scratch. I think another good thing might be Figma, actually. So if anyone's interested in designing a website, for example, right? Not necessarily something that's completely functional, but maybe, has something that you can actually look at. And if you click some of the buttons, it actually takes you somewhere, right? That's definitely a very viable option, in my opinion. So if anyone's interested in building a kind of pseudo website, very pretty looking, let Mr. Rudy know, or let me know, and then we can talk more. I think,
and that's funny because I can actually take them through that now, because I'm part of the manager of the school website. so I can kind of show them how it looks behind the scenes, so they can get an idea of what can be added. So I can kind of start them on something like that.
Oh yeah. Okay. Great. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like also when you're looking at websites, you could also take them through like the inspect tool on Google Chrome, and they can see like all the different HTML elements and see how it's like built out. And when I get bored, I sometimes do that on websites. So yeah.
Yeah. And another thing is, if you guys ever have any questions for Sravya, I mean, she's a really awesome person. Definitely reach out to her. I mean, she works at Instagram, and I think she's super awesome, but she has so many more stuff going on behind the scenes too. Like, for example, little known fact, Sravya's an artist, and she's actually done photography shoots for many people, including celebrities. And she told me about some of the people that she's done photo shoots for, and I'm just like, there's no way. Like, I've literally known about this person for years, and you just casually went up and did a photo shoot for them. That's insane.
Well,
Or
Eric, she told you, so now I feel like I gotta know. Like who
I'll leave it to
Talking about
Sravya. Where are some people?
I'll send my website somewhere. You can go stalk me. If you type my name on Google, it's probably like first thing that pops up.
Sravya's
So.
honestly like a celebrity in and of herself right now. Like,
not definitely not true.
in my opinion, she's done a lot of photo shoots for a lot of people, and I think it's really interesting. And she's also, I mean, hosted her own magazines in the past, and I used to buy those magazines.
Eric does have them. Eric does have the magazines. This is true.
I still have those magazines. Yeah, I bought those magazines when they came out and all that.
Which magazines? We're talking about like Vogue? No.
Magazine.
No, not Vogue. But like I said in the beginning, it was part of a magazine in college. So I was a photographer for it, and then I ended up becoming the editor-in-chief / president. So I would like organize a bunch of stuff, and we actually also had someone on the team who built our website. So like, you know, things like that. So that was a really fun thing.
Well, I'm definitely gonna stalk your name on Google, right?
Oh God! Now I have to
here,
figure out what they have about me on Google.
But yeah, Eric. So whenever you get a chance, Eric, go ahead and share that with me, the doc, so that I can get resources. So I can get those resources to the students, so that we can start to like really delve into that, because like I said, right now some of their accounts are not working. So for me to have something that's interactive with them would probably be good to have as an alternate while we try to get this whole